Hi, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and today we're going to be looking at sort of directionality. There are certain cards that where things are pointing at can play and have an impact on what the card actually means. Now, I'm listing all the ones that I've seen in various places. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use all of these or any of these. There are certain ones that I do pay attention to, like the clouds. But I don't always, every single one of these cards do I find it to be significant in a reading, or all the different directionalities. I'm just sort of going to list the ones, like I said, that I've seen on multiple videos, maybe multiple websites and things like that, that just seem to be fairly common, and going to list those here for you, and you'll, I guess, decide whether or not this is something that you use within your readings or not. First, I'm just going to go through the cards individually, and then I'm going to be laying out a grand tableau. Then we'll also touch a little bit on, seeing how that directionality works within the context of a spread. So first we have the Ryder, and this one, and again, every deck, let me just make this note, every deck that you use could have the Ryder or all these different cards pointing in different directions, which kind of makes doing left and right to be more difficult. And so I guess that's when you start to use the head and the back of the actual card, because it can change. Now, some modern decks, such as the Celtic Lenormand, offers you two choices, and there's some other decks like that will offer you riders going in two different directions. So whichever one is the way that you generally use, you're able to pick that particular direction. So that's quite nice. Otherwise, you can just simply go with that whatever deck you're using, for the Ryder, what it's looking towards is being energized, and what's behind the Ryder can be something you need to watch, because it may be in danger of stagnating. And so, that one's going this way, this one, so this would be what's energizing because he's riding towards it, and what's behind it is, starting to be left behind or stagnating. And again, so, you can't necessarily, or you wouldn't necessarily look left or right, because it may change depending on the deck that you are using, unless you have the choice of the cards. Now, the clouds, I think, are the most, the common one that you hear, where, you really do want a deck that shows, specifically a light side and a dark side. The light side tends to be things are easing up, in my opinion, and the dark side is where the real confusion and the difficulties are laying on the dark side. And, well, this one has this on the same side. Generally, I want to say most of my decks have the light side on the right and the dark side on the left, but I'm sure that that's not always the case. So you just want to make sure, that the clouds is one of the cards I look at in a deck before I get it, because I do want to specifically see a light side and a dark side. So that's something that you would pay attention to. The coffin, I've heard of various types of things, because some coffins have like a blanket laying over part of it, and so that can mean one thing or another. But for the most part, the coffin, because of the way the coffin lies, you simply want to look before and after it, just to see what are the cards that are most impacted by the coffin are the cards on either side of it. That's the most general rule that I've seen, and what I generally will follow. But as anything, I think, you can look at all the cards surrounding it, but traditionally, I think the cards that are on either side of it are the ones that you want to pay attention to. I didn't use the Celtic Lenormand because that has a burial mound, but that would be the same thing. This, you would just look before and after, just to get an idea of the cards being impacted. Now, the Scythe, you have a couple different directions that you can look at. So the part where the pointy end is where the most danger lies. So generally, I think both of these, yeah, they're pointed, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's different, but for the most part, they're set up like this. And so the pointy end would be over here on the right. That's where the most danger lies. On the other side of it, it can be a harvest, can actually be almost a positive. So like if there was a money card, that there could be a good thing, you know, a gathering in of money. So that's seems to be iffier, but it certainly is an aspect that can be the case, so I wanted to bring it in. So we would have sharp point is where your danger is. Where the back end of the scythe is can actually be a harvest, because you think about harvesting with a scythe, you're actually, as you can see, here's the fields, you're bringing in wheat. You know, that's not a negative thing. So this side can be a harvest. The blunt end, depending on how it's pointed, generally it's what's above it is sort of getting a kick in the butt. I've read somewhere a while ago, I can't remember, I want to say from Hex Claire's videos, and that really resonated with me. That's kind of you poke somebody with it, like kind of, all right, you need to get moving on this particular area. I do use that as well. And then a couple places I've seen say below the scythe can be where the problems are. So we have danger, sharp cutting over here. These are where some problems. This could be the harvest. This is a positive end of the scythe. And same thing with the kick in the butt. Like, I don't necessarily think that's negative. That's just kind of saying, okay, you need to pay attention to this and get moving. So these kind of ends are a little more positive. These ones are a little more negative. And again, if your I keep saying scythe. Again, if your scythe is flipped, you know, you're looking for the pointy end, the back end, you know, below and top. Then we have the storks. The storks can be behind it. So depending on how these are both kind of standing in the same position. But whatever's behind the side, whatever's behind the stork is where the change is coming from, and what's in front of it is where the change is headed. So that can be, and again, I'm giving you all these different options to the cards. You may find some of them resonate with you and use them, and some of them you may think, no, I'm not really going to work. I'm just looking at the cards that are around it. That's a decision that you have to make as a reader. Now the path's quite interesting. I've seen this in a couple places. I know I've seen it on Mikhail's YouTube videos. I saw it definitely on a couple different websites. And this can really change depending on how the pathway is set up in the particular card. But if you think about, you know, a person is coming along this path, right? And then it comes to a crossroads of where they can go. So the card that's where they're coming from is over here in this particular path. So this card could give us some idea of where they're coming from. And then our choices could either be this way or this way. And so this can give us some ideas about what is the choice that's coming up. What does the choice have to do with these two things? I think this next, yeah, so this is a different directions, but you do the same thing. You're coming up the path from this way. So what's down here would be where they're coming from. And then this card, and for me, straight ahead, would be, so these would be the two choices. So you really pay attention to what your particular card is showing the pathways and where it's coming from. It just kind of common sense, and then where it's going. This I see twisting off to here, and this I see going forward straight ahead. For the mice, you can look at the faces of the mice, though some I saw doing just right and left. So you can do what side the mouth is facing is getting eaten away, and then what side the butt end is facing is being dirtied. That's one way I've heard the mice explained. Although sometimes, you know, you could kind of say, well, his butt's this way and his head's kind of this way. Some cards are looking straight at you and it's not really helpful. The other way that I read with mice is that you're losing whatever's on the right of the card because what they took away from the left of the card. So you're losing something here because something was taken away to the left. So that's another way that I've seen it. So it can either be the mouth end is eating away and the back end is getting dirtied or, you know, muddied because of the back end and what comes out, or that idea of you're going to lose here because what was taken away to the left. So those are two different ways that I've seen the mice card. Now the cross card, I also have seen a couple different ways that what is before it is going to be becoming less important, and what's after it is getting greater significance. So that is one interesting way that I have seen. Also, if you're using the whole four, the cross obviously is pointing in four directions. So if you're going to use all four directions, this I believe I saw from Mikhail's YouTube videos. I also have read it in some books I know. So this I've seen in a variety of different places, but where the left is an ending, it's a period, this is over, so this kind of adds a period to things. To the right gets strengthened. The bottom is burdened, if you think about the cross like sitting on top of it and it's burdened, and then what's above it is getting pushed up or lifted up. It's kind of getting destiny is giving it a leg up, is one way I saw it read, because I have it in quotes. So somebody wrote it that way. So it's being bolstered up. If it's what's on top of it's being bolstered. But again, these are all things that you can see what resonates with you and how you're going to particularly use that. And it may just really zing in a particular reading that, oh yeah, intuitively you just think, okay, this is where we are. This right here, we're definitely, something is ending here and this is starting to get strengthened over here. Or you may just use the up and down, like this is being pressed down and this is being lifted up. So that's just something that you'll have to come up with on how you particularly use it. And that's just another version of the cross. Now, those are the main ones that I've gathered in terms of directionality. You also can use the men and the women, although I know some decks, which I've heard, is one thing you also want to look at when picking a deck, is that the man and the women should be looking in different directions so that you can kind of see where she's looking, see where he's looking, and are they looking at each other? If they're not, I want to say the Gilded Reverie, not the full set that gives you the choices, but the smaller one, the man and the woman are both looking in the same direction, so you would never get a point in which they were looking at each other. I don't tend to use that aspect, but I know a lot of people do, so that's something you'll want to pay attention to. The Celtic Lenormand gives you options, so you have 4 different choices for men and women, and they do have the looking aspect. Now, books are a little more difficult, and I don't really use these because every deck is so different, whether the book is open, whether it's closed. When it's closed, I've heard, the binding side can mean that's where a secret is because it's bound, so to speak. And the option of getting opened up would be on the side in which the binding was not. But every deck can be so different with the book cards. So I don't really do anything with those, but I did want to mention that because that is, in terms of studying, I have seen all the various variations of the book. So that may be, if that's something that interests you, that may be something you'll need to look into and then decide. I really do think that all these kinds of traditions with directionality, even with timing, is something that you're going to have to come to sort of an understanding, because you can read 5 different places and get, 3 or 4 different answers. So you have to really kind of decide for yourself, all right, this is what I'm going to do, and stick with it, because you can't change it around too much so that it means this, or it could be this, or it could be this, because then you're in a reading and there is no clear answer because you've got 50 different ways in which you could possibly read the directionality. And so you really, I think, as with everything, and I've said this I know too many times, but I think with anything to do with reading, whether it's tarot or Lenormand or Kipper cards, whatever it is, you really, it comes down to consistency. What does this particularly mean to you consistently so that you get consistent readings, especially with things like Lenormand and Kipper cards? Kipper cards, and I'm going to do another video on timing and directionality for that, because directionality seems much more integral to Kipper cards even than Lenormand cards. There are people outside of my balcony and she is not happy about it. So please ignore her growling and gruffing. Now, mountains are ones that I couldn't find really definitive on, but sometimes people will say the lighter sides of mountains are where things are easing up. Sometimes where you can see the path might be to get around the mountain. That's going to give you an idea of some way of getting around a situation. So that's sometimes something that I take a look at. Like obviously this goes out to sea. You're going to be doing a lot of swimming if you go this way. But we can kind of tell, well, if we go this way up the beach, we might be able to get around the mountain. Other mountain cards, where you can kind of see pathways through them. And so you can use that to give us an idea of where you might find an easing through the obstacle that's being faced. Because remember, mountains are not blocks. The coffin card is a block. That sort of is a cutting off or an ending. Same thing with the Scythe. Something really is getting cut off. The mountain is not a block card. It's an obstacle card. You can still get through it. It's just going to be difficult and probably going to take some time. So you can kind of look at to where there may be a way to ease around it. The snake card is not necessarily traditional. This would be more, I think, along with the Kipper card, but you can look at snakes to see if you're reading it as sort of transformational, or let's say it's a lot of times for me it's a winding path. We can kind of look to where the head is pointing, depending on the card. Look to where the end is pointing. So these are all just directional things that you can start to develop just when you're looking at cards, depending on what again you choose to do. You just need to be consistent about it. But the ones that are the most traditional that we have in terms of directionality are the Ryder, the clouds, the coffin, the Scythe, the storks, the path, the mice, and the cross. So, and the people. I do see a lot with the people as well, but not so much as what means this behind it, before, whatever. It's more in terms of, I think, with relationships, kind of, are they looking at each other? Are they positioned so that they can see each other, or are they back to back? That might tell you something. I don't tend to use them that way, so I don't know a great deal about that, but it just takes some common sense to think, okay, if they show up in a reading and their backs are to each other, that probably means things not such a positive sign as in a position in which they're facing each other. So a lot of the directionality is just common sense, and again, picking what you're going to do and stick with it. So now I'm going to lay out a grand tableau as I will take a look at some of these directional cards. Okay, because I didn't mention it before directly, I don't think, the cards that I was using before were the Celtic Lenormand as well as my Piatnik deck. So those are the two cards that we were looking at before. Right now, to look at the Grand Tableau, I have the Under the Roses card set, because it has the names of the houses on it. So I have that laid out. And then I'm using For the Seekers. The company's called For the Seekers. And the name of the cards are Game of Hope, the mini version, which unfortunately right now are not available. But this is a mini deck of cards by For the Seekers. Just because a lot of times people then ask, what I'm using, so I want to make sure I put that there. So I've laid out, the houses again, so that we can see the houses. Although we're not really going to be working with the houses today, but it just makes it easier. So I'm just kind of shuffling up. So we're going to take a look at a general grand tableau and see why I do not do very good shuffling around a tripod. But again, I do tend to try to sort of do a grand tableau specifically for a person in mind, and so I do want to have them actually shuffled, because I just think that it makes even instructional videos better, or more effective when there is an actual something in mind. In fact, you even hear that where people will say, you know, the cards kind of, if you're just laying them out flat, then that's what you're going to get as a flat reading. So I'm not going to go through the full reading on this. We're going to kind of look at the directional cards, and maybe a little bit in relation to where they are with people, but if I can get a good shuffle, and I'll cut some of this out. Okay, so once you get them shuffled up, you're just going to go ahead and lay them on your houses, however you choose to do. You know, we talked about that in the houses video on some ways in which you might create houses. This I just happen to use for ease of use, and it's the most compact way for you to be able to see both the houses and the cards that are on them. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of go in order of what we just talked about, the different cards, and just kind of look at them to see, you know, how you might use these in terms of with the cards actually around them, just so we can, you know, kind of see it in action versus just talking about it. So the first card that we had talked about before was the Ryder card. So now here we have, sorry, now we're going to have loud road noise. So here we have the Ryder here, right? And so the Ryder is about messages. It is in the mountain house, the house of the mountain. So we might have some message regarding obstacles that is layered in there. But whatever it's pointing towards is supposed to be energized, right? Or that's kind of the direction the message is going towards. And then behind it, we're going to watch for something that we're going away from. It can also be a sense there's some stagnation there. That may be something you need to pay attention to, because you're leaving it behind and not really paying attention to it. So it might be a reminder to pay attention. Now here we actually have some directional cards butted up to each other, but right now we're going to look at the Ryder, and the Ryder is pointing to the Scythe. So if this is quite, well, this whole little thing right here is quite interesting just in terms of directional cards. This kind of pops out because, again, this is actually a reading for somebody. So what pops out right away to me, if we look at the Ryder card and we have sort of something painful here, and this pointing towards the Ryder, we have something, a painful situation that's being cut off. We have this card is actually being energized because this is the direction that the Ryder is pointing to, and something that's being left behind is the Man card. Now if we do also look at the Man and the Woman card, see, he's facing this way slightly, he's looking this way, and the Woman card is facing this way, and as if you can see this, we have them kind of back to back. So visually you can kind of get that feeling of there being some difficulties. We have lots of road noise. So we can see visually that if we're looking directionally, purely, we can see some difficulties there because they're not facing each other, they're back to back. And then when we take a look at this scenario here where we have a message about an obstacle, you know, this is a long-term obstacle, this is not an easy obstacle to get over. And what's being energized is a painful situation, right? We have a painful, and the pointy end is pointing there, and we have a painful situation here, and what's being left behind, because it's behind the Ryder, is the Man card. So this right here would tell us, okay, we might have some difficulties in the relationship just by looking at the positioning or the directionality of the Man and the Woman, and then these two cards. So right away, or this little set of three that's right here, so right away we might have some issues, and so that might be something that we would want to look into more carefully. Now so I that was quite interesting. I wanted to point that out. So we covered, we started with the Ryder. That was what we were kind of looking at. Another card that has, the next card that has directionality aspects that we want to look at would be the Clouds card. Clouds card is right here. Now, this is one of those cards that I don't like technically how the clouds are set up, because it almost looks like the dark clouds are at the top and the light clouds are at the bottom. We don't have that left and right. I personally read this card light and dark just because that's how most of my decks are, and that's how I view the card. And we do have, no clouds kind of over here, even though this is light. That's how I choose to read this particular. Let me hold it up so you can see more closely. Although with the lighting, I don't know if you can, but I don't particularly like how this cloud card is set up, so I read it the way most of my other cards are. But technically, you could also read it with the dark here and the light down here. I choose to read it with the light to the right and the dark to the left because that's how most of my cards are set up, and that's how I view the cloud card. So here we have things lightening up, right? So if I'm using this as the light side, things are lightening up in the towards the choices. So that tells us, okay, there's something about this choice that we're going to make may be able to lessen the impact of the clouds card. So we want to pay attention to that choice. We also have the darkening over against the mouse card, which is also a directional card, right? So with clouds, we have some problems going on, and that's amplified by the fact that the side that's really the dark clouds and the problems is on the mouse, which is not a good card. That's something being eaten away. Some books. So knowledge, secrets, information is getting eaten away at. It's being lost, and that's it being amplified, giving more weight to that because it's on the side of the dark clouds, if that makes sense. So then seeing those, I would say, okay, well, we want to definitely, which we're going to do anyways, come back to this path card because clearly something about this decision here might help to lighten up the impact of what's being heavy in this particular person's life. But when we look directly at the mouse card, because I'm trying to just focus on covering the directionalities. Now remember, we talked about how the mice can be read a couple ways. You can read the mouse at whatever direction the mouth is facing is being eaten away. So in that sense, that's a positive thing because we have the mouse eating away at the dark clouds because of maybe knowledge, right? There's information that's being gained. There's something that's available to the person that is going to eat away at the dark clouds, the darkness, the heaviness that's going around them. But there is, if you look at then the butt end being sort of muddied or dirtied, whatever's on this side, we have a sense of loyalty and long-term, a long-term loyal prospect is being muddied, which we already can kind of see. We've got some muddiness going on here, some problems going on in the relationship that could also be indicated by this particular reading if we look at it that way. Okay. However, you can also read that whatever's over here is going to be lost. Okay, we're going to lose something over here because of what is being eaten away before the mouse card. So the second way of looking at the mice card is that whatever card is before it is being taken from, and that is going to cause a loss in the card in front of it. So that would be read quite differently, and this is why you need to make a decision about how you read something and stick with it. Otherwise, you can come up with too many variables. So here we have loyalty is being eaten away at, the sense of faithfulness, that loyalty is being eaten away, and because of that, we are losing dark clouds, which is a positive thing. So that's telling us maybe that the loss of this relationship, because we have it in this ring, and because we have the sense of these situation right here, so this could tell us that the loss of this relationship and a long-term relationship actually may be necessary in order to improve things. Because remember, not every ending of a relationship is a bad thing. Obviously, to the people involved, it feels like a bad thing at the time, but we've all been in relationships in which, you know, the ending of it might have been hard and difficult and painful, but it was necessary. It was something that we needed to move on from, and in the end, it was a positive thing for us to go through. I think most of us have been in that situation if we've lived long enough at one point or another. So that's one way that you could look at that, depending on how you see the mouse card, which actually either way, we have the clouds being eaten away because this is sullied, because this is, so either way, it's kind of telling us the same thing. You're getting the indication that yes, most likely there is something going wrong and this relationship is probably on the verge of ending, but we get the idea that this may actually in the end relieve some stress, relieve some depression. This may be something that is necessary to lose, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've kind of looked at the Ryder, we've looked at the clouds card, which led us over to looking at the mouse card. We'll go back up here to the Scythe card. So if we look at the Scythe card, again, we have the sharp end. Now this is upside down from the two that I showed you before. But remember, just look at the sides of the card. So the sharp end is being this message here, this sense of something that's being told to us, positive news. You know, Ryder's generally positive. This is being cut off because we've got this little sharp, there's a pain, this adds a painfulness to this. This is probably more of a painful message. We have the blunt end, right, which I told you is sort of a prodding, a sort of motion that can be to the past card, which we already had on the other side of the cloud, saying this could reduce the oppression that's going on. And so this again also gives us, tells us, okay, this choice here is going to be important. This is going to be an important thing. We need to pay attention to this past card. That's what it would tell me. Again, the other side of, so we have the sharp end here, the other side of the scythe head can tell us something that we're going to harvest, something that's going to be good, something we're going to bring in. And here we actually have the moon card, which is a positive card, right? This is a card that this is a card about emotions and intuition and something rising, the rising of something good, the internal things rising, and we have that being harvested. So we almost have again that idea that we had here, that perhaps by the ending of this relationship, by the ending of this message here that we have that seems to be connected with the relationship, by the ending of that, something else good is going to come up of that. We're going to be able to release our intuition, you maybe have a release of her emotions and her feelings, may be able to start to rise with the moon. So we actually again have a confirmation that perhaps the ending of this relationship is going to be what's necessary. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. We know it's going to be painful. No matter what, when you end something, there's pain there. But that doesn't mean that in the end, this may not be what needs to happen. Okay? So we have that going on when we look at the scythe. Now, make sure I'm covering all these cards. So then we look, the other card that we talked about was the Stork card. So then we find our Stork card, which is over here, and it's in the house of the sickle. So again, we have sort of a change and a movement, which is generally positive, from a painful ending. So that's again quite I think a reaffirmation of this situation that we're kind of following along as we follow these movement cards or these directional cards, right? So now with the Stork we talked about, the point, you know, where it's facing is going to be where the change is coming. Or I'm sorry, where the change, so where it's facing is where the change is headed, and what we're, see here again, okay, so with the Stork, so this is where it's coming from, and this is where it's heading. And so here we have the ring in the house of the whip. The whip is about disagreements and strife and kind of troubles. So this relationship we can read in context of the whole spread that we've starting to see come to. So you start to, this is why I love grand tableaus. You just start to see this message coming out. You start to follow these kinds of things and it starts to pull together, and it really is like doing a puzzle, which I just love. So we have a relationship that is in the house of the whip. And that's what this stork, this change is coming away from. And what's it going to? It's going towards the yes card, the success card that's in the house of the bouquet, which is the best luck, the best news. You know, this is the best good luck that we have. And so again, this 3 card reiterates again the fact that we're moving away from this relationship that's in discord, and that is a very positive. This is a very positive situation that happens. So we have again confirmation that, okay, yes, there is trouble here with this relationship and we're moving away from it, but that's probably for the best. And not even probably, this would be a yes, that's probably, things are, once we get through the initial pain of it, because we do have the Mountain card here sort of connected. No, we don't. Once we get through it, you know, once it's going to be take time, as any relationship's ending, but it's going to be a positive thing. Okay, so that's looking at the Stork card. The next card that we want to pay attention to, which we've gotten confirmation we need to pay attention to, is that there is a choice to be made, and that this is going to be important. And we have, so here is where the path is coming from, which is the Child card. So we have something new. So it's coming from something new. And it's going to the clouds. If we go one way, we're going to have clouds. And if we go the other way, we have a new decision. I kind of read that as sort of a new decision to be made. And the decision is going to head, if we go one way, we're going to clouds. If we go the other way, we're going to good luck, and we're going to good luck in the Lady card. Now, generally, what I might do is, because this doesn't so much tell me what is the choice, but because of everything we've already seen, we kind of know what the decision is. And this is again an affirmation that says to us, you know, you have a choice here. We know what's the difficult part. Staying in the relationship is most likely going to end with trouble and oppression and not happy things. And going in the other direction, as we've seen, is most likely going to be a positive thing for this woman. Now, for the man, see, we're not reading for the man. So for the man, this may not be a positive thing, but we are reading for the significator is for a woman. And so for her, this is going to be a positive situation. Now, what I might do, because we have seen that the path is, the choice is so important, when I'm done with the reading, I might actually pull a 3 card with the path, you know, finding, you know, shuffling, finding the path and seeing before and after it to get more clarification. That's something that I would often do if something stands out as being really important. But this is not a video about that. This is a video about directions. So then the last card that we really want to pay, you know, that we talked about in terms of directionality would be the cross card. So here then we would find our cross card, which is right here. And I've said before, I don't like, we have a mini cross and a big statue, but be that as may, this is the cross card, right? And so we talked about 2 ways of looking at the cross card. What's before it is becoming less important, and what is in front of it is going to have significance. So this is going to be a significant card, which is interesting because it's also the card in which we have the harvest come from. So this is another indication that what is going to come out of the ending of something is going to be possibly of great significance and a good thing. We have it in the house of the Tower, which tells us there may be a period of stepping back in order to sort of regain the sense of self, and the sense of your intuition, and sort of get back in touch with our emotions, you know, their emotions. She's leaving a relationship, so obviously emotions are going to be, she may need that stepping back period, and there's going to be this is significant. This combination here is significant because it's in front of the cross. And what's behind it, we have again in the house of the Stork, which is about change, we have the Sun card. So again, if we were even to follow the Stork over to its house, we get the sense again that whatever is changing is going to bring forth great things. You can't get a much better card than the Sun card. And this change that is coming, now again, we have the change moving away from a discordant relationship towards success and good luck, and also a reaffirmation that this change is going to lead to great happiness. Okay, so we can see by looking, and again, I'm just kind of following each one of these cards so that you can see how they might work. But just in terms of the reading itself, you can also see how you start to piece together this puzzle that gives us a quite interesting concrete answer, because it said it's the same thing multiple times. It's saying, look, listen to what I have to say, because this is it's being repeated. For me, that lends quite a lot of weight there. The other way to look at the cross card, this is kind of most often how I look at the cross card, but the other way to look at the cross card that we talked about is what's to the left of it is ending. So this would have it being completely different. So happiness and positive change is ending. And then what's to the right gets strengthened. So this sense of stepping back into your emotions is strengthened. And what's underneath it is going to be burdened. We're going to have even a more burden to what's being eaten away is going to be even more burdened. And what is put above it is going to be lifted up, which is this idea of change. I don't tend to read that way, to be quite honest. That is a traditional way of reading, and you can. And this is where it comes down to you needing to pick what you choose to focus on as your way of reading it, because otherwise you're going to get a muddied message. You can't really read it in both ways. You need to pick one. So for me, I tend to read it this way. But I did want to show you both ways of looking at that. So there we have, those are the major directional cards, and how you might apply this to a grand tableau. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you have a lovely day. I was going to do timing and direction together, but it's too much for once, so the next video then will be looking at timing.